A little background information about the Alliance Center. We are a nonprofit in Denver that exists to bring people together to solve systemic problems, especially around climate change. We convene and mobilize our network of nonprofit organizations, for profit businesses, government agencies, academic institutions, and community members to collaboratively create sustainability focused solutions. The Best for Colorado program of the Alliance Center is that it's a program because we acknowledge that a sustainable future is not possible without leadership and innovations from the private sector. This is why the Best for Colorado program serves as the hub for corporate social responsibility for Colorado businesses. It allows companies to measure and improve their social and environmental impact regardless of where they're at on their corporate social responsibility journey. As we dive into today's content, I wanted to share an interesting statistic that I read from CVent. According to CVent, 71% of people with disabilities leave a website immediately if it's not accessible. I'll share that again. 71% of people with disabilities will leave a website immediately if it's not accessible. How does that impact your business? Diversity, equity, equality, and inclusion shouldn't just be, a little checkbox on an application or social washing your customers. It absolutely should be a part of everything you do because it does impact everything you do. We are so excited to turn it over to today's speakers. Please allow me to introduce Amber Hines, the CEO of Road Warrior Creative and Equalize Digital, and Nico Brooks, a principal of Two Octobers. Amber and Nico will be sharing with all of us how they incorporate diversity, equity, equality, and inclusion into their businesses, how they've reached marginalized communities, people of color, and people who are differently abled. Amber, please take it away.
Thank you. Hopefully everybody can see my slides up there. So as mentioned, I am the CEO of Road Warrior Creative. It's a digital marketing agency, and we're a certified B Corporation. We do everything from search engine optimization and social media management to website design and development for clients in a variety of industries, both small businesses and also large enterprises, government agencies, and universities. And in 2016, we started doing a lot of work on the accessibility side, which led to us last year spinning off our accessibility work into its own brand, Equalize Digital, which is why there's two company names there. So Road Warrior Creative is our parent company, and Equalize Digital is our the brand that we do all of our accessibility work under, and so that's the branding that you're going to see on the slides. So let me go through. So I'm going to talk a little bit about two different areas here. One is how we include people with disabilities within our company, and then also with the work that we produce and getting back to that, how to make websites more accessible. So one of the things that I have noticed is that there are some really great diversity and inclusion initiatives at a lot of companies around racial and ethnic diversity, gender equity, LGBTQ populations. But a lot of companies fail to think about how people with disabilities can also be included. And so I always like to emphasize that it's important to think about how people with disabilities can be included in your diversity and inclusion initiatives, because they're not complete without that. And so what that means, there we go, is that you need to make sure that you have policies in place for supporting both employees and team members, and also how you interact with the public or your customers around disabilities. So before we go further, let's first define who we're talking about when we're talking about people with disabilities. And it really goes around the first 5 elements on this slide. So A lot of people think of the more obvious, someone who is blind or visually impaired, someone who is deaf or hard of hearing, and when they think about accessibility. But there are also things as far as people with cognitive disabilities or people who are unable to use a traditional keyboard or a traditional mouse because they might have motor challenges, people with seizure disorders. Those are the main populations, but accessibility features, especially when we start to talk about communications and software and websites, they really benefit a wide range of people, even beyond those people. So the elderly, people who are on slow internet connections, or people who have temporary or situational limitations. So, an example of that is if I broke my right hand and I couldn't use a mouse temporarily because I was in a cast, I may eventually go back to being able to use a mouse. But in that time period, uh, if the websites weren't set up in a certain way, then it could be challenging for me to engage with everything in the content or internal software as well. So, what I also like to highlight too is that the CDC has found that 1 in 4 US adults has a disability of one kind or another. And as I mentioned, it's not always something that we're born with. People can experience limitations or become disabled over the course of their life, whether through an accident or old age. And many accessibility features can be beneficial to everyone. So, how we have addressed this in our company, I want to talk a little bit about our employees first, and I want to set the scene by talking about we are a small company, but we are one that operates 100% remotely, both with our team and with our clients. So we don't have an office that people are going to, and we don't frequently meet with our clients in person. It's all digital and remotely. And we do on our website development and with our accessibility work, we most frequently work with blind individuals, but we also do sometimes work with people with cognitive disabilities as well in order to test websites for our clients and to ensure that the work we're doing is accessible. So, because we are remote and we are including individuals with disabilities in our team, that means that we have to make sure that our required software stack is fully screen reader friendly for blind people, and or we have to follow special procedures in order to make sure that we can work with our testers. So when you are building an inclusive workplace, you have to make sure that you have more than just that EEO statement that everyone's required to have when you do your job postings. You have to make modifications for your employees or team members, or in how you interact with the public in order to make sure that it is accessible. As part of our shift to becoming a more accessible company, we sat down and drafted an accessibility statement that we included in our handbook that clearly communicates our commitment to accessibility and how team members can get support. So that was something that we felt was really important. We talked about what are all the different aspects, what is our commitment, how are we going to support anyone with disabilities and the various ones. And then the second thing we did is we as a remote company had to test all of the software that we use as a company and that we require our team members to use to ensure that they can actually use that software. So for us, that's things like Zoom, our project management software, Adobe. If we were to have someone that needed to access something in Adobe, we use G Suite for all of our documents and those sorts of things. So we had to do full testing and or research looking into different organizations. And in some cases, like with our CRM software, we actually changed what we were using in order to make sure that we were choosing accessible software for our team members to use. And then for anything that is process related, you have to sit down, and we looked at ways that we could modify our processes to make them more accessible to someone. So we have every Monday, for example, a team meeting that takes place on Zoom. If we have someone who's blind that is a tester that's participating in that team meeting, they don't have to log into Zoom. They can join via their phone because there's not really any benefit to them being in the Zoom call. They can if they want to. And we have done Zooms with our team members, but sometimes they choose to be on their phone. And so they do that. And then one thing we have found is that the chat in Zoom is not especially accessible to or super screen reader friendly. It can be hard for them to get to the chat or to find information. So while we're in a team meeting, if we're sharing a link and saying, hey, let's all go here and talk about this thing, we will email that link to that person rather than saying, try and find it in the chat in Zoom. So that is a way that we have changed our processes in order to make it work better for those people. So this is really where you have to sit here and think about what can we do as an organization that makes our company more accessible for disabled team members or people that maybe don't have the same abilities that most of the other employees have. And I think it's really good to do that before you hire someone or before you even do that job posting. Because one, as I mentioned, you might have to do a lot of software review or review of things that might change how you structure the job in order to make sure that it is accessible for everyone. But another thing too is that even though different people have different ways that they like to be accommodated, and you're probably still going to have some flexibility, we found that it's a lot less daunting when you first start interviewing candidates who are differently abled if you have already spent the time looking into how does our company or how can our company work with these kinds of employees. So then it gives you a starting point for that conversation. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit here to talking about customers and accessibility. So accessibility policies and statements are equally important for your customers and any communication that your business does with the public. At this point in the United States and in many places across the world, there are laws that require businesses to provide accommodations and communications that are equally effective for people with disabilities. I have up here on the screen the Americans with Disabilities Act and two examples of part of that act that relate to communications or could apply to websites as an example. But depending upon where you are, different states have laws, different countries have laws, even across Canada, there are different laws. So you want to be aware that these can apply to your employees and they also apply to the public. And there are a number of lawsuits increasingly that are being filed against businesses that are not meeting this. So I sort of think with showing this graph, we go from 262 lawsuits in 2016 to 3,550 in 2020, and this is within the United States, that it is something that you want to be aware of from a legal perspective as well. So what you need to do is make sure that all of your marketing and all of your diversity and inclusion efforts, they're not just internal to your company, it needs to be external as well. And you need to look at your products and your services that you're offering, any communications that you're sending out into the world, whether that is your website, whether it's an email that is being sent when someone purchases a product on your website. So all of that needs to make sure that they're accessible to people of all abilities. When we were doing this internally, we sat down and we discussed, what does this mean for our products and services, and how can we create a sort of a core value statement around it? And we determined, this is a statement that we have public on our website and that we have really made core to every choice that we make around accessibility for people of all abilities. And it's that as a marketing agency and a creator of websites, applications, and digital content, and as an organization that is committed to diversity and inclusion, we have decided as a team that we believe we have a social responsibility to ensure that everything we build or create is usable by people of all abilities. And if you think about it, even before COVID, the web is a gateway to, or always has been a gateway to a lot of things. Education, access to information about food, transportation, healthcare, basic necessities, all of that is opened up by access to the web. And so we really looking at this and we're thinking, especially in the past year where people were stuck at home, a lot more people are taking advantage of things like online grocery ordering, ordering products online, ordering food to be delivered to their home, or getting access to healthcare, teledocs, that sort of thing. So we really started to feel like there's an ethical obligation to make sure that everyone has equal access to all of those services or products. So we've made a commitment to uphold this belief as a core value that drives our organization and the work we do. And we're hoping to, and this is part of us being a B Corp, we do a lot of sort of speaking on this and educating on this with our clients, and we're hoping to help inspire other people to follow this same sort of core belief as well. So again, this is a repeat of the slide that shows who accessibility helps. And I like to put this up here because I will be the first to say that living up to that core value and making all of your communications accessible is not easy. It does require extra work and times. Certainly for us building websites, it's way easier to not put extra work into JavaScript code to make things accessible. If you're uploading a video to YouTube, it takes longer to make sure that video has captions. But I do feel strongly that it is worth the effort because of the wide range of people, all of whom are likely to be in your customer base and engaging with your business on the web that will benefit from this. So if you're looking to make your communications more accessible, there are some easy ways where you can get started that don't require you to be a developer or have highly technical knowledge. I've listed a few of them out here. So it's things like testing your website for accessibility. This may mean you hire a company like us, or it may mean that you use a free tool. There are free tools available on the web, regardless of what kind of website you use, that can scan your website automatically and tell you if there are problems and what they are. There, as well as testing your website, any graphics or print materials that you create, you can use a color contrast checker. That's a really easy one to make sure that the text is readable because there is appropriate contrast between the text and any background color behind it. If you're making any sort of digital brochures or you have any forms that are PDFs that people have to fill out and you create those with Adobe Acrobat, you can use their accessibility testing tool to make sure that they are actually accessible. And then maybe I should have listed this first, but add an accessibility statement to your website. Talk about what you are doing, what your progress is towards accessibility, because it may not happen overnight. And most importantly, how can people get help? If your website is not accessible, how can they reach out to someone and get help? And then another really obvious one we mentioned before was adding captions or providing transcripts for video and audio. But most importantly, I think you need to learn about accessibility. There are tons of training courses, blog posts, podcasts available, many of which are free, that both provide information about various disabilities and how they can cause problems on the web, which is good to have that underlying understanding as you're making decisions in your organization. But also there's trainings that teach you how you can better make your content or what you produce accessible. And then I think it's really important to make accessibility part of everyone's jobs. It's not just your designers or your developers' job. It's something that everyone from the receptionist who answers the phone to the CEO should be responsible for. And you really want to strive to create a culture of accessibility throughout your organization. So I want to leave you with these words from Devin. He is one of our testers who does a ton of testing for us, and he is a graduate from Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And that's how we came to work with him, because we frequently hire students from there. And he was talking to me, and he told me accessible websites are my portal to accessing information, accessing news, talking to people, learning information. Without inclusion, without accessibility in the digital realm, it becomes impossible. So it means a lot when a business can make their website accessible. I appreciate that you came to the presentation today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have once we get to that question period about either making your business more accessible for employees with disabilities, or if you want to talk about making it more accessible for your customers or the public. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amber. We've gotten lots of really great questions, and I promise we will get to them just after we hear from Nico. So, Nico, I'm going to hand the event over to you now.
Okay, somebody give me a thumbs up that you can see my screen. Perfect, thank you. So thanks a lot for being here. It is an honor. I'm really excited to talk about apprenticeship and some of the things that we have, as an organization, have discovered about how the process of apprenticeship can impact an organization and really the economics of our community. So we became a B Corp last year, and any of you that's been on the ground as part of this process, this is probably familiar to you. This is part of the B Corp assessment, and this is one of the questions that we had to answer on our path to becoming certified. And so this question says, the topic is creating and managing inclusive work environments. And we checked all these boxes and we got full credit for this topic. And if you look at the specific questions, we include a statement in all of our job postings, which harkens back to what Amber said. We conduct anonymous or blind reviews. So we're doing these things that are good. They're good steps. But as Amber said, adding text to your job posting in and of itself doesn't accomplish anything. And when so moving forward, as we looked at diversity in our organization, one of the things that this touches on, and one of the things that was really important to us, was diversity in our approach to hiring, and we ran into some really stark realities. So this is our job posting after going through this process of self-examination, and are we really following best practices with regards to DEI? And so you can see, and this is pretty typical for job postings. If the whole thing isn't here. It does say, I believe it does say preferred, but right there to an applicant, it says 4-year degree in marketing, business, some other things, preferred, and 3 years of experience in digital marketing. I suppose I should have introduced myself and said, I'm Nico Brooks. And I work at a digital marketing agency in Colorado. And so we hire mostly digital marketers. So here's one of the things that we ran into. So this is the inside ring here, according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. This is the racial and ethnic composition of marketing and advertising jobs. And then on the outside ring, this is what the country looks like. And so you can see, like my industry, is, we got a big problem. It's sort of approximately half representation, all else being equal. And so by saying that we require that applicants have 3+ years of experience, well, already we're discriminating. Like right off the bat, we're saying, if you look at the inside pie, we're just saying, well, we're going after the inside pie. We're not going after the outside pie. We discovered this anecdotally just in our efforts to reach out to different communities. And I'm emphasizing race and ethnicity here, but really this problem exists in socioeconomic across the socioeconomic spectrum, and military veterans, people with different abilities. This is just a profound problem in my industry and in a lot of professions. So then the other thing is, okay, the other thing, we expect a 4-year degree or more. And I mean, this is no shocker to anybody, but college tuition is, I mean, it's increased way past the rate of inflation. This is in real 2020 dollars. This is what's happened to education over the past 25 years, which is meaning that an impact of that is that a 4-year degree is becoming less and less accessible to a wide swath of the population. So at the same time, here we are, a digital agency with good intentions, and the jobs that we're hiring for, the job that we're hiring for is one of the most in-demand jobs that there is. There are, the supply does not equal the demand. We have a hard time finding people to fill these jobs. Like how crazy is that? Like, here we are, we've already self-selected for a fairly narrow segment of the population that we're saying we'll consider for these jobs, and we're having a hard time filling them. So I guess it was very clear that there's a profound problem with how we're trying to do things. I think as we were going down this path and trying to figure out how to shift our underlying assumptions, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's Swiss, and I described to her, I was like, you know, we have this commitment. We really want to take DEI seriously, and we're actually having a hard time sourcing candidates. And she says, well, yeah, that's because your system is stupid. So she described to me how they do things, and how, like, her children are going to go into apprenticeships, and that's going to be how they qualify for careers, and just generally, like, unemployment rates, how young people are actually earning incomes when many young people in the US are accruing debt. And the employers are actually have a vested interest in the education of these apprentices. They're participating, and they're providing constant feedback on, well, these are the skills that we're looking for, and are actually engaged in the education process. That was super exciting to me, and I guess I wasn't aware of anything in the way of professional apprenticeships in the U.S. I knew that I knew it was something that existed in other parts of the world. So I started talking to people, and just started, I don't know, you know, socializing this idea, like, could we start our own apprenticeship? And what was really cool is, like, people just started coming out of the woodwork, like, yes, you can, and I'd like to help, and had ideas. They were like, you know, well, here's somebody you can talk to, because these people over here are actually doing something like this. And I ended up being connected with a few people that work for the Colorado Department of Labor, who were just amazing in helping me figure some of these things out. So I'll fast forward a little bit. We assembled an apprenticeship. We put it all together, and this is what our apprenticeship looks like. So, and the goal of our apprenticeship is that under candidate selection, this is what we look for in terms of qualifications. No, like, we do ask for a GED or high school diploma, but no college education, no experience. We're looking for the qualities that we have found actually make a difference in our organization. When we look at, like, who succeeds, it's people who like solving problems. We have a culture of helping each other, and people that like to help fit right in, and people that love learning. Well, turns out there's a lot more people who like solving problems, helping people, and learning than can afford college. So we've already started to see that the candidate pool that we're reaching is a lot larger. So the way that we went through the process of registering our apprenticeship with the U.S. Department of Labor, which is a sort of formal program and process, and the way registered apprenticeships work is they're either competency-based or time-based, and we went with a competency-based apprenticeship, which is why this says that the apprenticeship takes approximately 3 years. It says done in 3-ish years. So what that means is that an apprentice has to demonstrate a set of competencies that you define. And in the first year, they're making money while they're doing community college. As a registered apprenticeship, that is most often completely paid for. We are also doing training, and they're earning an income. And then the expectation is that after the first year, they're working for us full time with full benefits, and we shift into more on the job training, less classroom training. And then by the time they're done, with our goal is that they stay with us. We hope that apprentices will stay with us, but they are now a fully qualified digital marketer. So just honing in on a couple of the pieces of this. So our apprenticeship is, we have community college. We've partnered with the Community College System of Colorado for the classroom credits. There are some things, some coursework that we went to Coursera for, more specialized. In both cases, this can all be done online. And then we've developed on-the-job training for the competencies that we were looking for. And we had already had developed this, a lot of our training. I mean, honestly, like as we started to figure this out, we're like, why didn't we start doing this sooner? Because we, like, I mean, and you've probably found this too, is that people, when we would hire people out of college, they didn't actually know how to do the job that we were hiring them for. We do digital marketing, and they weren't really learning the skills that we were looking for. So we had to train them anyway. And so why were we expecting that 4-year degree? I mean, really just momentum. I don't know. There's not a good reason. So when they're done, here's a picture. Option A, you go to college. On average, people graduating from college are $30,000 in debt. Our apprenticeship, after 3 years, you are a fully qualified digital marketer. The average salary for that is $58,000. And you've gone through all of like education in digital marketing. We have a very rigorous program. This is not like, our intent is that this person is somebody that we are ready to have own client campaigns and accounts. We're not cutting any corners in the training and education. So I wanted to tell you about our apprenticeship, mostly just because I think we can solve some huge systemic problems through apprenticeship. And so if you're interested in hiring digital marketers, digital marketing apprentices, please talk to me. But if you're just interested in the idea of apprenticeship and could it fit into your organization, or are you part of organizations that could help evangelize it? This could really change some fundamental issues with how we're not just not allowing a huge segment of our population to thrive, but we're hurting our economy because we need these jobs, we need these skills, and we have creative people who love learning who can't afford to spend 4 years of their life accruing debt. So breaking that down. As I mentioned, we got a lot of help. I'd love to point you towards the people that helped us and help you myself. And the steps are then you just design your program, you register the apprenticeship, and you start changing the world. This felt really, I mean, it felt personal, and I don't know, this is a funny time, right? Because we've all been personally affected by the pandemic, and current events. So it feels personal to all of us. But it definitely contributed to my enthusiasm that what I was seeing around me is reflected here in this data, which is that a lot of my friends were fine. People that I went to school with, I mean, in some cases, like my organization, a digital agency, actually has done pretty well in the past year. And meanwhile, other people I know were really struggling. And I mean, this is shocking to me, but not. I mean, shocking in a way. And is it possible to be shocking and not surprising? I think it is. Like 6 in 10 college educated employees were working from home right off the bat, and 1 in 7 with just a high school degree. Like the disparity there, um, it's heartbreaking. So again, thanks a lot. Please reach out to me. Make an appointment to talk about it. Like I said, the, what I'd love to do is get other people thinking about how to create apprenticeships and create a pathway into careers where people can work from home, contribute to the economy, help Colorado, help themselves. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Nico, so much. And thank you, Amber, to both of you for your time and transparency around this topic. So for the next part, we are going to open it up to all of you. So if you would like to come off mute, please feel free to share if you are a business, maybe something you've done around this topic, or if you have questions for Nico and Amber, you can ask them directly. Otherwise, I do have a couple of questions that people have sent me through chat, so we can answer those. But I will see if anyone is brave enough to come off of mute and join in.
I have a question for Nico. Nico, are you familiar? Am I on mute? Okay. One day we'll not be able to say that. We'll not be able to say you're on mute. So, Nico, are you familiar with Good Business Colorado? They're a value-based business association that is advocating for value-based businesses and practices at the Colorado legislature. They are always looking for organizations to partner with and share something like this. I think that this would be a fantastic route in their equitable communities, and actually equitable communities and prosperous economies. There's actually several Good Business Colorado members on this call today, but I think that would be a good avenue if you haven't heard of them.
Heard of, but I would, if you had, could make an introduction, I would love that.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that you posted your email, so I'll connect with you on email, and I'll connect you with Jordan. He's the membership director, but they're always looking for ways of building a more prosperous economy and equitable community. Those are the 2 working groups that they have.
Yeah, and I should say we're not the only ones doing this. There's a IT services business in Colorado, Tectonic, that has really actually paved the way for a lot of this, and we looked at what they were doing as a model. So it's a kind of a movement. It's small right now, but
you know what? It takes radical collaboration to create exponential impact.
Awesome. So Amber, I have a question for you that came through the chat.
Mm-hmm.
As a startup, how do we build accessibility into our bones? Do you provide audits and recommendations of software and processes?
So the answer to the second part is yes, we do audits of not just websites, but also software and like web applications and different tools. But I will say that if you're using some of the major software, so like if you're using Adobe Creative Suite, if you're using G Suite, all of the major tech companies have huge initiatives into accessibility, and you can find a lot of information. There's something called a VPAT, which stands for voluntary product accessibility testing, and it's a report that itemizes how all of the features of whatever the software is aligns with WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and or Section 508 guidelines. If you are federal or federally funded, then you have to follow Section 508. And those can be really helpful too. All of the major tech companies, you can find those documents publicly available on their website. But I would say the biggest thing is, like we did, sitting down and deciding how are you going to try and support people with disabilities both in and out of your organization, and writing some really clear policies about that. Like, make sure that you have that written up in your employee handbook, your operations manual, have a public accessibility statement on your website. And I think as a startup, like, that's probably the first thing to do, is really figure out what are these policies, what is the pathway that someone goes to if they need to get assistance, how can you modify different things, is there different procedures or technology that needs to be used in order to support those individuals. And then you could also, if you are interested, like one thing we did was we reached out to, because we're down in Austin, and in Austin is Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And we said, hey, we really want to start hiring. We have a need anyway, but we want to see, can we build a partnership with you? There's another organization here that's a nonprofit in the town that we're in that's much smaller, but it's a home for people with disabilities. And it also, like, they're trying to give them jobs and allow them to live independently. And so sometimes we go there and we hire people with cognitive disabilities to do testing if we have certain things. So try and see if there's other organizations in your community that support disabled individuals, and you might be able to partner with them for, hiring or certain aspects of your job, or what your company is offering, depending upon what it is. So.
Awesome. And then there's like a follow-up question. You mentioned that there's a website businesses can use to evaluate their own website for accessibility. What is that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different tools that are free. One of the ones that is most commonly used is called Wave. So that URL, I'll grab it and post it in the chat. But that will work on literally any website. So you can actually, you could test not even your own website. You just go there and it will do a single page at a time. So if you need to do a full scan of your website, it's not necessarily the best for full scanning, but it could give you just a picture of your homepage. If you have a WordPress website, I'll put in a little shameless plug. We have a free plugin on WordPress.org called Accessibility Checker that basically does wave-like scanning inside your WordPress site, and then it will test as kind of like Yoast does for SEO. So that's useful if you're trying to maintain your content in an accessible way. But Wave is a great tool. There's also some Chrome plugins both for Wave, and then another one is called Axe by DQ. And you can install them in your Chrome browser, and then when you're on the website, you just hit the little Chrome bug, and it automatically scans whatever page you're viewing and gives you a report.
Awesome.
I saw another question. Should I read it?
Yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay. You briefly mentioned in your talk about working to mitigate some access issues as well, such as making things accessible to people using their phone or who have intermittent or poor internet access. What are some ways to make websites information accessible to those populations? So one of the interesting things about accessibility is that it equally works for people on slow internet connections and helps with speed, because there's a lot of things with regards to movement that many designers and even we have customers that come to us and they're like, I want something that moves all around and it looks really cool. But it can actually be really bad to have sliders or even what's called parallax, which is where there's a fixed image in the background and then the content like slides up in front of it, but the image stays fixed. because for a variety of reasons, this can be disorienting to people who are sighted, but they maybe have a vision problem or they have low vision. Some people if they have photosensitive epilepsy, can actually have a seizure if you have too much flashing or too fast of movement on a website. So removing those kinds of things is helpful for accessibility, and it also reduces the amount of code on the website, which then makes it load faster, which is better for people on slow internet connections. So it's really simplifying. It doesn't mean that it can't be an attractive website. You can make a beautiful, accessible website, but it does mean you're not going to have things flying in from all directions and a ton of JavaScript code. So.
Awesome. Nico, this question is for you. Can you expand upon the funding for the apprenticeship? Is it funded by your business? What does the government provide, if anything?
Sure, yeah. So there is a lot of assistance available. So there are really two key parts to a registered apprenticeship, and you have to submit really fairly specific plans for each of these. One is called related instruction, and that's instruction that happens outside of your workplace. And then there's on-the-job learning or on-the-job training, which happens in your workplace. And the related instruction piece of it could be through universities, it could be through trade schools. It really the idea is that it is more like a classroom instruction, and there's both Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Labor funding for assistance for that piece of it, and there's also state level funding in Colorado, a fair amount. That varies state by state. So it's not a complete slam dunk, that piece of it, but there are a lot of resources available. And then we're providing the on-the-job training. And in our case, we will be supporting apprentices on the related instruction piece of it, but you don't have to.
Awesome. And then there's a follow-up question. Do you hope that the apprentices become long-term employees? Like, is that your ultimate goal with this program?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Yes, and we are so we would like to, I mean, our first apprentice started 2 weeks ago, and we're super excited about that because it was a bit of a journey getting the apprenticeship put together and passed through the Department of Labor and everything. So it's been a while in the making. So this feels like a I don't know, big milestone. But we would also like to help other organizations. So in our case, we're a small agency. We can only bring on so many apprentices, but we would love to help other organizations that hire digital marketers. And so the way a registered apprenticeship works is we are the sponsor of this apprenticeship. So we do the paperwork with the Department of Labor, and we've developed curriculum and training materials. And we'd really like to help other organizations take on apprentices. So if your organization or organization where you think this might be an option, we would love to help. So and obviously, if somebody else takes on an apprentice, we can't. We wouldn't be hiring those because hopefully you love your apprentice and you want them to stay on your organization forever.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thank you again so much to everyone who joined us. I am going to start to wrap it up here. Huge shout out and thank you to Amber and Nico again for just sharing, what your businesses are doing and your transparency around this topic. I hope you all found this conversation as enlightening as I did.